Alright, we're going.
We're coming along on our rat rod project. I've put more parts on the motor. We've got plugs in it, we've got wires, the distributor's been set to initial timing. We've also lowered the fan pulley so that we'll get the fan more in the center of the radiator. We also centered the radiator. We found that it had to go down about 7-8 inches from where it normally sat because of the channel on the body. We don't want the grill sticking up so we can't see over it, so we try and bring it down about level with the cowl. And I made a saddle to go from one side of the frame to the other to set the bottom of the radiator in place. That's not welded in or even located more than just initially at this point. This is about where it's going to set, give or take an inch on the top and the bottom, more than likely. I've got a fan blade also that we're going to mount on the end of the fan pulley. Dave Brott donated that. I asked him if he had any fan blades left over from hot rod projects. He says, yeah, I think I got one. So he gave me a fan blade, and I've got to make a little adapter for it for the front of the fan pulley, but that's all we got to do there. I've initially set up the starter solenoid, and there's the battery that we bought for it. I set up the starter solenoid on the firewall. That's where I want it to set. Put a hot cable over to the starter, connected the starter solenoid to the hot cable according to the instructions of the starter with a 12-gauge wire. Also, I put a ground strap on the motor to the frame on the other side underneath this motor mount. You can't see it from here, but there's a nice heavy ground strap grounding the motor and frame. And I've got the ground strap on the battery clamped to a part of the frame that I ground bare, so I know we've got a ground everywhere. Everywhere there's a ground. I've checked it with my little light tool. Mounted the coil. That's a 12-volt Ford coil meant for electronic ignition. This is a Unilite. This is basically electronic. And the resistor that came on it, on part of the bracket. I thought, well, instead of buying one, I'll see if this one works. We'll use this. And I mounted that, ran some wires, hooked the wires up to the body of the Mallory Unilite. Hopefully the way they're supposed to be with a ground. I've got a ground on the back of the alternator. Turn the motor over. The starter turns and works with my jump start outside solenoid that I can just activate with either my foot or my hand, and the motor turns over very freely. And I know the oil's being pumped because the oil canister has filled up. So we've got oil pressure, and it's probably going to all the mains and all the rods. To initially start this, I sucked up some gasoline into the sediment bowl of the fuel pump, and I've plumbed only into the center carburetor. I'm not worried about the end carburetors working at this point in time. The end carbs are secondary carbs. They're only meant for beyond a third throttle. This is the important carburetor right here. This may have some leaks, I don't know. It's been rebuilt, but I don't have a lot of faith in it. I may have to make some adjustments to this or take it apart and check the float level and so on and so forth. We're drawing gas out of a chainsaw gas can, a small can that I keep around for the weed whacker and the chainsaw. That's got a little bit of oil in it, so we'll get a little oil in the top of the cylinders. It's called top oil, and that'll help lube them in this initial startup. Put the oil filler tube and cap on. Those are all part of what works. There's the PCV valve, positive crankcase ventilation valve, which is drawn out of the old road draft tube hole, and it's being sucked in the back part of the intake manifold underneath the last carburetor. I put the plugs back in it and finished the wiring. Run coil wire. Just strap the stuff to here. Let's should be about all that's needed to make it go. I put a switch on it also, so I can turn the ignition on and off, or the power to the distributor and the coil. Let's see if we can make it run. We'll see if it'll start. I got to do three things at once when I do this. I've got to run the starting solenoid, which is in my left hand. I've got to run the choke, which is going to be in my left hand, and I've got to run the throttle, which is going to be in my right hand. So, kind of like a piano player, I got to do a whole bunch of things and make it work. We're running straight headers, so if it starts, it's going to be loud. I'm going to turn it on and see what we can do here. Run the choke. How about that?
It runs.
It runs. It runs, it runs. It doesn't run smooth. That carburetor's probably going to need to come apart. I'm going to have to order a rebuild kit for it. There's probably something in that carburetor that's not working. I've got the timing within reason so that I know that it runs, you know, and it doesn't appear to be skipping, but I've got to run almost full choke to make the thing work. That means it's not sucking gas somewhere, but yet there's too much gas getting into it elsewhere. I got to figure out where that is and why it is. I don't know the answers to those questions. I don't know. Let's flip these open and see if we can get a lower idle out of that. See if it's drawing anything past those throttle plates. It may or may not be drawing gas from those. Well, it can't draw gas. They're not hooked up. No, they're not hooked up. So that's not a possibility. Warms up quick. Sounds all right. I guess I'm going to have to rebuild that center carburetor to try and get a nice smooth idle out of it. But that's the first time that motor's been running over 20 years. And it sounds good. It sounds like it's going to be a real runner. Back of the vehicle, we're going to put a gas tank in it. This is a gas tank that we inherited also. I think it's a Blazer gas tank. Wouldn't swear to it, but it's a nice tank. It's one that's been taken care of. We thought we'd mount it between the frame rails. This cross member used to be up here. This was part of the original frame of the back of the 53 F100 part of it. We just burned out the rivets, knocked them out, and moved it back so that we could slide this tank in, and it appears to be a pretty decent fit. Got to change the filler. That's going to be easy. Just plug that, put a filler somewhere else. And I need to put a pickup tube and or a gas gauge sending unit at the top of that. And I got to figure out what it is before I can do it. But that'll either mount there or it'll mount under it, one or the other. We haven't quite figured that out yet. That might be just a little high in that position. I may want to set that below that. We'll see how it works out in the end. But that's about it for now. Sounds like the rat rod's gonna purr like a kitten sooner or later. Right now it's roaring like a lion.